Hi, it's Jeff Pulver having a very special edition of our LinkedIn Lives with an old friend talking about something really important, and that's the future of truth and how AI reshapes reality. Steve, how have you been?
So I have to say, in preparing for this conversation, I took a little trip down memory lane to the very first Bonn conference.
Ah,
And, those of you who don't know Jeff as long as I do, um, he was and still remains, but was at the time, just a fireball of energy. And he saw the future with such passion and conviction that anyone that didn't believe both voice on the net and then later video on the net were going to be the future was just flat out wrong. You either got on the train with him or the train left without you. And I remember the energy of that room. I don't remember where it was. Must have been, was it, it wasn't, I don't remember where the conference center was, but I remember. Um, so we were then running our first video platform, and everyone that was part of that movement, you know,
yes, that was up in Boston. We were in Boston. And it was really it was I call it fun. I mean, I don't know how else to wrap around that energy, but it was challenging, it was fun, it was dynamic, and it wasn't about who was wrong and who was right. We're all present, and we had a chance to really touch the future at that moment. And it was back then. It's when I set up my first internet TV studios, as I called it, and I believed the future. I never really thought about how we were going to do voice on the net and video on the net. I knew it was happening, and so that's why I got involved with that back then. And I kept my studios around for about 10 years, and it is still fun. I mean, people going online right now, seeing a live stream that we're doing on LinkedIn, I'm doing on YouTube, they may think, oh, no big deal. Let me tell you, a lot of work went into allowing us to have this. And frankly, when we got started, there was something called the dial-up internet. People may hear sound effects of modems going off and on, but that was our life. And being able to do, I remember in 1996 using CUCME and having 5 to 7 frames per second. That was a lot, and that was black and white, 120 by 160 images, not full living color 4K video. And a lot has changed, but some things have not. This is always ultimately about people. So it's about the people who can think to the future, look forward, and then figure out how to connect those dots. And so I'm very grateful to be with you today. And now you are many other things, including an author, and you have a new book coming out about the future of truth and how AI reshapes reality. And certainly, anyone who's been on the planet the last 3 years has had some type of uh, experience where their truth was challenged. And it's not only about deep fakes. Sometimes it's about just truth itself. I mean, if you look at the telephone system today, it's like, why is it that 30 years ago when the phone rang, people answered it, and why is it today most people don't? And part of it goes to truth, goes to trust, goes to the fact that there was a time when people were not dialing someone's pocket, they were dialing somebody's living room. When we knew the person who was calling and we knew where the call was going, and we had fixed addresses, and as much as we may not like certain utilities, there was a trust that we could trust the company that was billing us. We could trust that it was coming from your home to my home. And I knew that. I didn't even need caller ID. I just needed to know the telephone number. And my mind mapped your phone number to your name. I didn't have to rely on a directory to do that. And there was trust. And then when we break trust, everything else falls apart too. So, it's one thing for us to rely on AI, but to have it reshape our reality and not understand where the truth line is and that trust line is very challenging.
so let me tell you the story of how the book came to be, and then we'll talk about where we've ended up. And just to be clear, for those of you who might be saying, "I'll go tune into something else," I am not a doomer. I don't believe that AI is going to tear the planet apart. I'm also not an unfailing techno optimist. I think that as consumers and users of this technology, we get to make some decisions pretty soon about how much we expect honesty and truth to come from it. And we'll put down the road in about 5 minutes. We'll talk about ChatGPT's decision to kill Sora 2, because say what you will about Sam Altman, he's inside that world, and he knows that what they built in that moment was profoundly dangerous. But let me tell you the story of the book. So I am running a young Gen Z focused organization called the Sustainable Media Center. And it is focused on the impact of social media and young people. And it gets to be COVID. And my wife, who is much smarter than I am, says, you need to have other, we're going to be trapped in this apartment for the foreseeable future, because early COVID, folks may or may not remember, there was no end date on it.
No end date.
Right. Which, so she said, listen, you should go to grad school. Now, this is a confession I've never made in public. I was a terrible student. I mean, I was a lovely, interesting person, but I was not a great undergrad. So the idea of going back to university was not something that immediately struck me as a bundle of joy.
Right.
But I was working then at NYU, and I went and looked at all the universities, all the programs within NYU, and I ended up discovering a school that is quite spectacular called Gallatin. Gallatin is a make your own major university within NYU. And I sat down, and in the course of a weekend or so, I wrote a proposal for a thesis, and I took it to Gallatin, and I said to them, look, I've spent my whole life in news and storytelling and information. I'd like to do a degree in truth. And they said, we've never had anyone study truth. That would be very interesting. So for the first year at Gallatin, I studied philosophy and history and science fiction. It was great. The faculty was fabulous. Students were fabulous. And right in the middle of that journey, ChatGPT arrived. And all of a sudden, it was clear to me that I had stumbled into the question I wanted to ask and where we were going, because the minute you use ChatGPT for 3 seconds, you understood that it was fundamentally about the line between truth and fiction. So I graduated with a degree in truth. My mother's pointed out that if I'd stayed longer, I could have gotten a doctorate in truth, and then I would have been Dr. Truth, but I am not
Dr. Truth. Okay.
I am Masters of Truth. And so then I went to this fabulous book agent and said, I think this is a book. I think the world is changing in some pretty profound ways. And he said to me very wisely, don't make it an academic book, make it a journey. And you and I have been together and known each other long enough that, we both know lots of people,
Yes.
So I went to immediately 10 of my interesting friends and said, would you talk to me about truth? And it was, Larry Lessig and Juan Enriquez and Esther Dyson and Gary Marcus. I mean, all sure. I do not consider myself a towering intellect. These are all people that I consider. And so the book, which comes out on May 12th, is conversations with them about the impact of social media on the world we're moving into. And I have some examples I'll share with you, but just suffice it to say, it has the potential to be quite terrible. And just I'll give you as an example today. I don't know if you've seen our friend Reid Hoffman's ReadBot, but there is no reason that I couldn't be talking to a Pulver bot right now.
It's true.
I'm busy.
In fact, I might be. You wouldn't know necessarily until
I wouldn't know.
Maybe we should have some test words, maybe some vocabulary, some
safe word. Yes.
Safe word that says, okay, Pulverbot. Yes. Okay. It actually is, because the real one is over here. Here I am. I'm back.
Yeah. And the thing that I think is worth saying out loud is that in the next 2 to 3 years, the amount of bullshit we deal with in our life, the amount of people we call to get a bill cleared up or a health insurance claim or whatever the like it's all of those interactions are so terrible that in the near term, AI might make them much better. You
I
might
would
say,
hope so. I've been preaching a future of conversations wrapped around a new emerging standard from the IETF called a VCon for virtualized conversation, where, most chatbots in the market today, as you may know, if you put that up against a goldfish is smarter because it has at least 3 seconds of memory. And I'm looking at a world of AI communication where you have memory and trust. And wouldn't it be nice, sort of like for your agent to talk to my agent, so that you want to deal with bills, you empower it with the ability to say your name, say your last name, have your voice with and a certain skill set, and let it wait on hold for 2.5 hours, get escalated through, and then get back to you and tell you that it accomplished its mission. Because if you could start delegating your actual menial tasks to someone just like yourself, who sounds just like you, I believe we can actually get more work done, as opposed to waiting on hold to resolve a bill, set up an appointment, move and deal with the puppies. It's all, we can do these things if we wanted to. It's like, you go online, you go to large conferences, and you look at enterprises deploying AI, agentic AI. But I think that for agentic AI to work, it needs to be done for the people first. That if you look at the history of instant messaging, it was never deployed by large enterprises first. That came as an afterthought. It was always about the people. Look at the rise of ICQ. Look at the rise of internet telephony with Vocaltech and iPhone. It was the consumers, the hobbyists, the people who played, who did it themselves, who then did something which then a company took on and ran with it. But you talk to your friends. I know many of those people, and we need to understand truth. We need to be able to verify truth. We need to be able to deal with consent. There's a lot of pending and current regulatory obligations dealing with provenance of data, dealing with how conversational information and how that truth is managed. If you're dealing in a regulated industry, we have to deal with permission to give permission to my data, permission to take it away, and managing that in the EU under GDPR, dealing with the US, and there's a lot of stuff we have to deal with. But that whole fine line of truth and permissions, it's an emerging field. Unfortunately, truth is an emerging field in the digital domain. Managing it is challenging. From your perspective, how do you
defining it is challenging?
It's really hard. I mean, it's like, why is defining it even hard, right? I mean, we should understand what truth is, but you're almost the doctor of truth.
Almost. So let's start with a distinction that I think gets lost in this conversation. There are two very different kinds of truth. There's subjective truth and objective truth.
Oh, what are the differences?
So objective truth is 2 + 2 = 4. No disagreement there. Or this is the chemical makeup of oxygen. There are scientific truths that are the basis of a lot of the things in our physical world. And then there are subjective truths, which is Jeff saying, I think video on the internet was a net positive society, and someone else, not me, saying, no, I think it's negative, and here's why. And that's a great barroom conversation about your truth versus my truth. But what happened as AI came along, AI came along at a moment when the political class, and I don't mean to suggest just Republicans, although certainly there's no doubt that Donald Trump figured it out sooner than anybody else. I mean, it is not a mistake that he chose to brand his social network Truth Social.
There you go.
And everything he publishes on it, he calls a truth. And the Trump political operation said, there are variations, there are subjective truths, and there are different kinds of truth. And that came back to how many people were on the lawn at the White House during his first inauguration. I think we're now in a place where the people that are trying to control the ideas that reach us have come to understand that getting there first with a great big story, whether it be truthful or not, tends to win. And you may remember J.D. Vance famously, there was that whole "they're eating the pets" story. And J.D. Vance said on CNN, it doesn't matter whether it's true or not, if it makes a larger goal for me. And it puts all of us in a place where the volume of information that's coming at us is frankly quite exhausting. And I think reasonable people could agree that's not an accident. And so what happens is, in a world in which we can't tell the difference between fact and fiction, partly because of AI and its ability to generate incredibly credible video at scale that is just fundamentally untrue, a not insignificant number of people simply throw their hands in the air and say, you know what, I'm out. It's too hard. I can't tell the difference. I know something's happening. I don't quite know what it is. And I'll just tell you as an example, there's a fabulous philosopher at NYU named David Chalmers. And he wrote a book asking the question, are we living in the Matrix? And Chalmers is brilliant. He's an Aussie. And I spent a couple of hours with him. And he convinced me that it's not out of the realm of possibility that the world around us might actually already be totally digital. And so I did, as a thought experiment, I brought David Chalmers into a chat room with Plato.
Okay.
And I had them debate truth. And I'm not going to say it's my favorite chapter in the book, because I have a couple that are really my favorites that we can talk about, but it's quite fabulous.
What did you learn? What did you learn from that?
Plato's very smart. I would say, I've never said this, if there were a judge, like in a boxing ring where they hold up scores, I think Plato won.
Wow.
Chalmers got in a couple of good blows, but Plato pretty much, has been the king of truth for a long time. That being said, I had an interesting debate. After I finished this material, I asked myself, do I have an obligation to let Chalmers review it before I publish it? And I realized digital David Chalmers and digital Plato were a fair match. But once I let the living one be able to override the dead one, that would be unfair. And so I did not let him read it before it went to print.
There you go. Wow. So who were some of the other favorite takeaways or learnings that you got from the interviews you did?
So Doug Rushkoff was spectacular. Doug tells a story about being 5 years old and being in a theater watching Fiddler on the Roof with Zero Mostel. And Zero Mostel is playing Tivia.
Yeah, I was at that. I was at one of those performances myself.
And then turns to the audience and speaks directly to the audience and breaks the fourth wall. And 5-year-old Douglas is deeply troubled as a 5-year-old about where the line is between, right? But what I loved about that conversation is, as brilliant as he is, he brought it down to a story that every reader will understand.
That's amazing. Wow.
Esther Dyson took us on a journey into news and fake news and the line between fact and fiction that went back to her college years and a trip to Russia, which I don't think is a story she's ever told before.
Wow.
What I didn't know going into this writing of the book was that these were all people I've known for a big chunk of my career in different ways, but I've never had a casual conversation with them about serious things. And so they're not speaking as academics or scholars, they're speaking as friends of Steve. And as a reader, I think you get to come along on that and feel invited into, Larry Lessig is brilliant, but when Larry talks about the impact of AI on the law, it's quite chilling.
Wow.
And I'll just tell you why. All of us listening to this, watching this, have at one point or another checked their what's it called, the score of what your economic score. I'm going to forget the name of the company.
You mean
Your credit score. Your credit score.
Yes. Okay. I mean, you mean for your credit report?
Yeah. Right. So it comes back with a number.
Yeah. Are you 850 or you 0?
Right. So whatever that number is, first of all, you've never thought of debating it with the company. You've never thought of calling the company and saying, wait, I'm not 740, I'm 820.
Right.
And secondly, if you did, there would be no one to talk to.
Yeah.
But that number affects your ability to get a mortgage or buy a car or, and so increasingly, and that's happening now in the workplace too, where you decide you want a new job, you put your resume into this maw and it spits out an answer which a hiring manager sees. And what AI is able to do is give what are fundamentally flawed answers that seem irrefutable. And that I think should worry us.
Yeah, I also think the weighting we put into certain things that AI gives us and weighting we don't put in other things it gives us should also concern us, that we should challenge everything that is said, not just some things that are said.
In the book, there's a drumbeat of consistent reports that individually you think, yeah, that makes sense. But when you actually read the book from cover to cover, there's absolutely no doubt that in its current incarnation, AI is biased against people of color.
I believe AI is biased, period, and it's also so there's the societal aspects, but even on the technical aspects, if you push, you'll find very interesting learnings, or at least leanings that I find challenging on different levels, and depending upon which LLM you talk to, I do find it, though, on the positive side. There is, thanks to the proliferation and availability of the products that are in the market the past 3 years, since ChatGPT became available to the public, we've seen a renaissance of things. One of the things I'm really proud of is that voice is back. That it turns out that in a world where agentic AI is happening, having the highest definition signal going in to an AI agent matters. And so I've been advocating HD voice for a long time, at least 18 years plus. And in fact, actually, I can go back 25 years and tell you that one of the reasons Vonage happened was because of I was running free world dial-up at the time. And the ability to even have just a G711 call end to end was mind blowing. The quality of that, of talking over broadband at a time when we were used to using technology that was laden back from the 1930s, was dramatic. And so in a world where AI is, ironically, bringing back voice is really cool. And also, let's face it, this whole era of vibe coding, however you define vibe coding, has made open source cool again. So now so many people have gotten into the area of coding, and even if it's not coding the way that I remember it teaching myself, we're thinking outside our own boxes. We're doing things we never could do before, or at least never considered before. And I think that's a positive. And I think that we are learning to do things, and we're adapting. So there's going to be the hard reality, and then there's the unintended consequences. So for me, voice is back. It's kind of cool. I think we finally have a chance to bring high fidelity and with better understanding into the communication network, and rewrite telecom, and won't actually be telecom anymore. And I believe we're going to have a chance to be better understood by those machines. But your point about your Equifax score, or whatever the score is, right? Having that inability to challenge a truth. I think we should find ways to challenge truths that are stated. It's like you rent a car, and the rental agency says that you cracked their windshield because they said you did, and you have no way to defer it. How do you, how do you prove a negative? It's kind of hard.
I think here's why I'm on a bit of a journey on this book, because at the end of the day, when you go to the supermarket and you pick up a package of food and it has the food listings on it, and you're trying to like get healthy or whatever, like you don't want those numbers to be made up. You want those companies to be held responsible, that when they tell you the nutritional value of a milkshake or whatever, that they're actually doing the chemical testing. All I want in the world of truth is that same level of responsibility. And if you look at the two last kind of point, if you look at the two lawsuits that came out of New Mexico and Los Angeles in the last week, both of which held Meta responsible for its impact on young people. Those were jury trials. They are going to be appealed, so who knows if they'll hold up. But the lawyer who was on a call with me the other day is very confident they'll hold up. All of a sudden, the idea that technology is being held to product liability has exactly the same interesting impact in AI, which is, you know what? You don't get to say Jeff Pulver is this and Steve Rosenbaum is that without being held responsible when you're wrong. And I think that we're holding all the tech that you and I built in our careers, we were held responsible for getting it right. And I think that AI, I mean, I understand they've raised a lot of money and they have to go public or whatever, but like realistically, not my problem. Like,
right.
I mean, the fact that so let's end on Sora 2. So about a month and a half ago, I took Sora 2 and I gave it a picture of my book, and it had a bunch of celebrities' faces in the back end. And I said, have these celebrities promote my book. And it produced videos of these celebrities who I don't know raving about my book that they'd never read. And I thought, holy shit, that's really fucking dangerous. I mean, for me, selling my book, lovely, but real. So I then went on ChatGPT and I had this 2-hour conversation, and I asked it quite pointedly, why is Sora 2 released by ChatGPT? And what it came to after a long journey was, it's incredibly dangerous. Sam should have known better. It does the company no good, and it releases the ability for average people to make fake videos at scale. Within 10 days of that conversation, they shut it down. So I don't buy this, oh, it was because of the money, it was too expensive. No, it was flipping dangerous. So let's not do dangerous. Let's do lovely and charming and
things that are marvelous and things that bring out joy and delight, as opposed to the danger line. So hey,
so the book comes out May 12th. Would love people to look at it. It's thefutureoftruth.com. You can pre-order it today, and I'll send you a signed copy if you pre-order it today. And I'd be delighted to send Jeff Pulver a signed copy of the book.
Well, thank you so much. And I appreciate you opening up this line of truth and opening up the conversation around the future of truth. I think it's a conversation worth having, a conversation we need to dive deep into more. And it's something which, we do have to be careful of and be able to verify to whom we're speaking, and to have that comfort of who that is as someone who you actually know, and not someone who is pretending to be that person, because these days that only will get more challenging. Stephen, it's great to see you. I have to say, it's been too long. Future of Truth comes out. By the way, I'm going to be in New York the week of your book. Are you going to have a book release event on the 12th?
We are going to do so much cool stuff in New York. We're doing an event at the New York Public Library with Marty Baron. We're doing a dinner party. Yeah, we have all kinds of stuff. We're going to be talking truth all over town. And
well, I'm going to be in Manhattan on the 13th. I'm hosting a meetup for people interested in AI and virtualized conversations. That's on May 13th. So
awesome.
I hope to see. I'll see you that week, hopefully in New York City.
Nice to see you. See you soon.
Nice to see you. Thanks for joining.